Well, welcome back to this episode of the Rookie Pastors Podcast. It's real conversations about real ministry by real pastors, casual conversations about real ministry by real pastors. I'm your host, Bryan Colley today, and with me is the fabulous, wonderful, extroverted Kyle Neiman and the doctoral, extroverted Josh Prince. Guys, how you doing?
Well, doing well.
I want to talk about it. Today's my introverted day.
I feel like I need to be more reserved after that intro.
Well,
Brian's subtle way of telling us to shut it.
Not knowing what order the episodes will be released, if you did not listen to the one where they proclaim themselves as annoying extroverts, catch that one. And
I don't think I ever said I was an annoying extrovert.
Well, for the
that's for the you adding that.
For the introvert, they're going to be like, I hate those people. So, anyways, today we've got some news to talk about at the beginning of this. Back before Christmas, we do our hat exchange, and we got some really great hats this year. I wear my biscuit hat all the time, and people actually recognize what that is, and so that's pretty cool. But we said, hey, we're going to give one to our listeners, and so we have.
No, Kyle said we are going to.
I did. I just dropped this.
Yeah,
Kyle speaks. It's totally it was like an ADHD moment where I'm like, we're going to do a giveaway.
Yeah. I need to bill Kyle because I bought that.
You do. It's on me. It's on my fault. I need to Venmo you, man.
Yeah.
It's all me.
Well, anyways, our listener, Anthony, is the one that will receive the hat, and it is the Lansing Lugnut Marvel Collection. So very, very cool. Excited for you, and thank you for listening. And so guys, today we're going to be talking about our wonderful, wonderful world of church facilities. And so to start it off, I know we all have things that we would love to change if we had a blank checkbook. And so if you had that, what is one thing in your church architecturally that you would change?
Yeah, okay, just one.
So I'm going to answer because I have two. Okay, but I'll explain why. So architecturally, I would not put a steeple on top of our sanctuary because it's not built into the frame. It's added on. And so we've had so many leak issues and stuff come from that thing. But, when you start talking about the potential, maybe we don't put the steeple back up after we replace the roof. Like, you might as well just go ahead and start applying for a new job because there's some people very passionate about a steeple. But anyways, that's architecturally. But when they built the sanctuary that we're in, at some point along the way, they moved from a naturally lit stained glass to a light bulb stained glass. And it's such a skinny space that we don't really know how we're supposed to go about changing out the lights. And so like in the back where the light switch is for those, you have to like turn them on and off about 3 or 4 times to actually get all the bulbs that still work going. And so, yeah, it's a whole thing. Like we have some college students now, so I might try and get a skinny daring one to maybe climb up there and see. But I'm pretty sure like all of those lights have got to be at least 20 years, if not older.
Right.
Good for the light bulbs. They've lasted quite a while, but that is the two things that I would change at the church.
Talking about the steeple, Brian's church logo has their steeple in it, so
yes,
you can't really do that.
Church logo,
For me, I have two as well. One's practical and one's just kind of personal preference for me. The practical one is our church was built so long ago. It was before the ADA existed. So like when it comes to people who have like limited mobility getting into our church, it like I get embarrassed by it. So it's like, okay, so this isn't the entrance. You have to leave and go around to this entrance. That's the accessibility entrance. And then our fellowship hall, kind of where we have like meals and stuff like that, is down in our basement area. And we have no way to get down there. So I'd love it if we had some sort of elevator. So that would be one. That's a huge expense. But that's just wishful thinking for the sake of mobility within our church, and an elevator to help our different levels. For me, personal preference, and I've gotten used to it. You get used to a lot of things at an older church, but is our carpet in our worship center. Our carpet in our worship center is like an emerald green. No, it's not red. I've seen the wine red at another church, and I was like, well, the emerald green isn't as bad anymore because the red's pretty bad. But it's an old carpet. It's been kept as well as it possibly can. But I would love to replace all the carpet in our worship center, a little more neutral. I think it would look so great. But yeah, those are two things. I would love an elevator and love new carpet. And my golden calf thing is not the steeple. It is anytime anybody thinks I'm talking about changing pews out for chairs, like it's a whole deal. So I don't even touch that. I'm like, I've never suggested that, but now I know not to.
Yeah. So wow, we have an elevator. And there's days that I'm so excited, like I just want to just go up and down in the elevator. But I'm afraid that it will break and then I will get stuck in said elevator. If I could do anything, I've got a couple of them, but one is remove all the carpet from the church. Our carpet is so old and nasty. A couple years ago, they did go into the sanctuary and or worship center and take out the red carpet and replace it with the LVT wood look. So that helps. But the hallways outside the worship center are red, that wine red. Our pews are that wine red. But then just every hallway, the office that I'm in, a previous staff member had a large aquarium that leaked all over the floor. So we have water stains everywhere. I just want to get rid of all of the carpet so we don't have to worry about that anymore. The other thing is in our worship center, it was built in the early 80s, and we have what we call the spaceship. And there's actually the spaceship and like two satellite ships, and they are where our speakers hang from the ceiling, and they've got the nice brown mesh speaker stuff. And they've gone in and put lights, like our stage lights are kind of inside it as well. And so it really does look like a spaceship is coming down or about to take off. Match that with our gold chandeliers that are the candelabra chandeliers all throughout the worship center. If I had a blank check, we would gut that whole room and just redo it and end up with an LED wall like Dr. Josh Prince has. So, yeah, that's what I would change. And those are dreams. Those are hopefully someday possibilities and realities. But oftentimes what happens is the church that we are at has done deferred maintenance, meaning they have not done anything to keep up their building. And because of that, that puts the dreams on hold, keeps us from being able to do the things that we do. So my first question is, how do you discern when deferred maintenance is a stewardship issue versus a faith stretching opportunity, especially when finances are tight?
So, we are all revitalizing pastors. And I came into a church that, our grounds were fine. Like, we didn't have any major issues. They had actually done a couple updates, which were great, that were beneficial to us as we, moved down the road a couple years and were able to do more of a remodel. I think that if you're coming into a church that has not been experiencing life or growth, then it's hard to think about updating spaces when you're not even seeing those spaces filled.
Right.
And so in some degree, that is a faith reality to what you're coming up against. And so when you restore hope in the church, you begin to take some of those things seriously. I think one of the big things too, which doesn't have as much to do with this question, but in a way it might, is when we get used to seeing something day to day, we begin to look past the flaws. We begin to just like the flaws just kind of fade into the background. And so putting fresh eyes on that space as pastors, when we come in, like, we can even do that, right? The background can be softened and we look past some of those flaws. And so I think it's important to bring people in and say, hey, can you guess somebody that's trusted, whatever it might be, can you come in and just walk our facilities? And can you tell us what we might be missing? What's confusing to you? And then, I think for me, it just depends, like with anything in ministry, with anything in leadership, what are some of the small boxes that you can go ahead and check?
Yeah.
And when you begin to do those things, that's super helpful. I think when you're getting into bigger financial needs, maybe it's a massive tonnage of AC that needs to be replaced, or it's the roof and your insurance isn't going to do much. I think it is a great opportunity for you as a church to be stretched and to be challenged. You can't do too many of those, in close proximity with each other. But I remember doing that at a church I was at previously. I mean, we were in a big financial bind, but we had a big financial expense that we needed to make. Otherwise, things were going to really
Mm-hmm.
start to become sufferable. And so the pastor really leaned into that and said, this is an opportunity for us to take care of what God has entrusted to us. And so can we do it, or will we not? And so it was really cool, a ceremony, really a couple weeks building into it, to stretch our people, to help them think through it, kind of to recognize the uncomfortableness of the situation as well. So yeah, I think that those are great opportunities, as difficult as they might be, to talk about the necessity of giving, of supporting, and of taking care of things that God's entrusted to us.
Yeah. You hit on so many things there that I think is so important. One, there's a little bit of an assumption with our podcast that, if you're a rookie pastor, you're not always walking into the best church situation, facilities wise and whatnot. You may be in a great situation. We don't know. But I think the biggest thing is, if you're going to lead people through this, you need to be able to evaluate these things. So getting those different opinions is huge. Learn of the issues as early as possible. One of the things I look for is, like, where is somebody regularly putting out a bucket when it rains, right? Like, where is somebody, like, prepping for some sort of weather that they expect? Like, they're going ahead and putting, like, extra towels down to get ready for the water coming into that door, that anytime it rains sideways, it's going to happen. Like, those things, one, write these down, I think is really important, but start recognizing where those things are. But as far as, like, how we discern when it's just that deferred maintenance versus a stewardship issue, kind of specifically around that, I think that starts with understanding, where's the rest of the budget going? Like, are we being good stewards elsewhere? Is there any room in the budget for contingencies? If there's not, those contingencies are going to become crises really very, very quickly. I think I've shared on the podcast, like, we had a massive roof leak. It was flooding our church at the beginning of last year, and we handled it as best as possible. And it was a very expensive fix. We had to replace that roof. We had to pay for all the cleaning and all this stuff, but we had been very good stewards at building up a contingency fund. And there were certain things that we could have fixed that we didn't. Like, we had 2 ACs that went out at the same time upstairs at our church. We chose to fix one because the other one wasn't servicing any rooms that people were using often enough. And it was easier to move people out of those rooms to a space that had AC than to fix both ACs. And so we just said, you know what, we're going to save that money. It's not crucial enough right now. So you have to always be balancing out those things. But if your church isn't ready for that contingency, it's going to become a problem really quick.
Yeah, and that's where the stewardship issue comes in. Like, the longer you put things off becomes a stewardship issue, because it's going to cost you more. When I got here, they had just begun the process of replacing the entire roof on the church. The year prior, they had to replace some AC units. This roof, it's like a $350,000-$400,000 roof that they had to replace, but it had been neglected for 15, 20 years. And it wasn't where were they putting the buckets out, it was where were they not putting the buckets out, when the rain came. And so it was really a situation of we've got to do this. And the hard part is, all the ceiling tiles look nasty. So, like, when a guest would walk in, it just didn't even, you could tell we didn't take care of what we had. And so they took a faith step. They took a loan out, to pay for a portion of it, and then we have a piece of property that they put up for sale, to try and pay that loan off when it sells. And and I think that's good stewardship in that sense. But faith stretching, I'm sitting here, all that was done prior to me getting here, and I'm looking at it and talking to the realtor of the land, and I'm like, that land's not ever going to sell, but we're going to pay this loan off and still have that sell. I just have that feeling, but that the people needed to be stretched faithfully to understand that's how we do it. But the longer you put it off, the more costly it gets. But you have to prioritize. And that's part of stewardship. And just understanding that stewardship is not just money. Stewardship is, priorities and
People. Yeah,
utilizing the
people.
people that you have. You might have somebody in your church. I've been joking around with our treasurer that we need to not just go recruit, like not just try and reach out to our community. We need to reach out to plumbers, electricians, drywall people, all those, so that we have those in our church. And that's a halfway joking, but you've got people in your church that can do some stuff. Make sure it's up to code and that you follow all the rules of your community, but that can help you when finances are tight. And that's part of your good stewardship. So knowing that all of us pretty much have walked in with issues when we got to our facilities that needed to be addressed in some form or fashion, and most rookie pastors are going to be in, most churches are in that shape today. What mistakes do rookie pastors commonly make when it comes to deferred maintenance, and how can they avoid alienating those members or burning their trust capital through those mistakes?
Yeah. One thing that kind of sticks out to me is I think you have to love your building. When we take on this antagonistic view about our building, then we start talking about something that's been so beloved and invested in by our people for a long time. We're going to talk a little bit about how we communicate things, and this is kind of dipping my toe into that. But I think one of the mistakes we can make as rookie pastors is touring the building and thinking, how is this going to work? Rather than touring a building and saying, look at the potential. That mindset really matters. When I first toured the building, it was a little overwhelming. There were rooms that were just full of stuff. There were things that were, not clean, that needed work. And I was like, okay, but look, this is a lot of space. There's things we can do. And I tried to keep a positive attitude. When I had our now children's director for the first time come take a look at the building and tour it, one of the things she said was, oh my gosh, look at all the space we have to do ministry. And I was like, there it is. So I think one of the common mistakes we can make is look at the building as a problem, when it is a tool that we're using and has been used, especially in the context of our building. I mean, here since the 50s, it has been used for a legacy of ministry. And if we start saying this old building and all its problems and all this money it's costing us, we are conveying that to people who have invested here, that they have invested poorly. And so I think that's a mistake we make, is making the building an enemy. Look at the potential. Be realistic about the problems. But I think one of the things we should do is definitely look at the potential first.
I think a mistake. Honestly, let me give advice and then talk about the mistake. I think my advice would be to make a list if you haven't, if it's not already made. And our property committee, one of the tasks that we added last year to their routine, their schedule, was quarterly they're walking the facilities together and they are making a list of everything, every ceiling tile that needs to be replaced, every light bulb that's out, every new crack that they find, whatever it might be. We're compiling a list. So here's my kind of challenge on that is, it's most often that we focus on the cosmetic problems so that things will look good. And in doing so, we might waste money that needs to be spent on bigger issues.
That's
Now,
good.
we do need to put, right, we need to put our best foot forward. We need to have an attractive campus. If it's lots of lights are out and it's dark and ceiling tiles are just gross, obviously you need to replace those things because people are judging you, right or wrong, whether you agree with it or not, the same way you do if you go into somebody's house and it's in disarray. Like, we just naturally have a reaction to the things that we see. And so, it should be that we're focusing on some cosmetic things, that we're kind of taking smaller bites of things that are doable. Kyle, revitalizing pastor 101 is, you're going to find rooms that are filled with stuff. And so one of the most basic things that you can do early on, once you've got some trust capital, is begin to clean those spaces out and help people understand, like, these are areas we get to grow into now, instead of where we just get to storehouse things that we probably never will use again. Like that chair from the 70s, it's not going to come back. It wasn't even cool in the 70s. Let's go ahead and get rid of it together. But
Just don't do that with handbells.
that's a journey. So I think the mistakes that we make is sometimes at least my personality will focus on all the cosmetic things. And then let's
Right.
fix that. Let's fix that. Let's do this. And we're leveraging resources that could be used to something more important. And so don't just take off on those routes of the easy things, the cosmetic things. Make sure that you are prepared for the bigger things, which I'll talk more about in a second.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I mean, I think that really follows up kind of one of the things we're saying. Like we're pastors, like we're thinking about the the presentation, how people are kind of eased into and given an opportunity to hear the gospel and to be taught. That's why it's so important to have a team and rely on people and ask for help, because unless you have, and some pastors do have a background in construction or maintenance or something like that, but I don't, I'm still trying to take care of my own house, got to lean into the people who have that skill set.
yeah, and I think that a big mistake is, especially when it would come to burning trust capital or whatever you've earned so far, is not. We talk about rearview mirrors are for glances only. Don't spend time in the past. You need to know the history of the building. There's people that I talk to people here at the church all the time. We were the second couple to be married in that sanctuary, or we were the last ones to have our a reception in that fellowship hall. My kids were baptized here, and my grandparents were baptized here. Understanding that helps you, in a way, prioritize, because those are the things that they'll get behind if it needs to be repaired. It's all about perspective. You can slap a coat of paint on stuff and it's simple. Rip carpet up, clean off the glue, and just go with that if you need to. But you do need to prioritize. Okay, we recognize that this is going to become a hindrance for us to do this if we don't address this, and so we need to allocate or reallocate resources to get this done as quick as possible. I also think the perspective is, don't rush things. Know that some of these things are going to take time, and build your team, get them to and I guess this is kind of going to what we're about to talk about here in a second. Build your team and get them to understand these things take time. We want to do it right, not fast. And because if we do it the fastest, cheapest, most, efficient way we can, that might not be the best way for us to do it long term. And so you gotta remember, and that's where leaning into the expertise of other people will help you do that. So kind of on that, Kyle said we're pastors. This is rookie pastors. How, as a pastor, can you communicate these needs that we have, these deferred maintenance needs, to the congregation, to, let's be honest, to the people that can help with those, whether it's through experience or financial, those conversations happen differently than a conversation to the whole congregation, without sounding alarmist, manipulative. The sky is falling. Kyle's already talked about having the perspective of the possibilities in the building, but how do you communicate that we've got to deal with this without it being such a dire situation?
So, for us, it's one of the big things that we're working on, both on the financial side and the property side, is we're planning for the storms. So one, we're seeing, okay, where are some of these issues that are compounding? And then financially, we're saying, okay, what is the responsible amount to be putting away per year, so that when we understand the age of our ACs, and so which ones are most likely to go out within the next couple years or maybe the next year, and so let's go ahead and put some of that money away. Let's prepare for it. I think that keeps you from sounding like an alarmist, because you're already telling the church on the front end of things, hey, we recognize that these things are going to happen. In fact, we have a really good hunch that these things are about to happen. And so I think it's encouraging to the church when, a committee gets to come forward, leadership gets to come forward and say, hey, we were actually prepared for that, instead of reacting. So we've talked about capital, right? You earn some capital with that, within your leadership and the leadership of others, because you've prepped and planned for that storm. I think it's also allowing other people to communicate alongside you is
Yeah.
really important, because if your voice is the one that is constantly bringing the negative realities, that's going to weigh on people. They're not going to really enjoy the announcements that you're about to make, because they feel like there's this impending doom every time you get up to the microphone. So I think sharing that load of talking about those realities is really important. I'm a committees guy. I think when we get them structured well, and they're really driven to support and lead the church in decisions, that's committees working at their best. And so allowing those people within those committees, or whatever your leadership team structure might be, allowing those people to help you communicate those realities is really important, because they're going to have vested interest with others. They're going to have some capital of their own that's going to help you out.
Yeah, and having
Yeah.
somebody that knows like that world really helps. I think of the movie Moneyball when they're sitting there talking to Chris Pratt's character, and he's like, the Brad Pitt's like, we're going to move you to first base or third base or whatever it was, and he's like, Ron Washington, tell him how's it going to be. He's like, it's going to be hard, like, but he's like the defensive guru, and there's weight in that. So if you've got somebody in your church that has a construction background that can say, hey, this is the reality of the situation, that can carry more weight than a pastor, having them echo that. So Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, one of the things, Josh, you were saying, you're not the one who has to do it all. And, put that off your shoulders. It might, especially early on, it feels like you do. It feels like everybody's looking at you to do it all. Don't. It is not your solo problem to fix all the issues in the church. And this is going to sound really controversial to say. If the reason everything falls apart is because you didn't do it all, that stuff was in bigger, dire straits than you were able to fix. And so you need to find those teams at your church. And if they're not there, you do need to help develop those teams. But who are the people who, when people come to you with complaints about the church, you can be like, hey, this is our team. I will communicate that to them. But not that every time they look at a leaking ceiling tile, they're thinking, oh, the pastor hasn't done this. Like, you need to take that off your shoulders. So that's a big part of communication is, I've had to learn when people come to me with complaints of saying, hey, that's something to talk to with this person about. And reminding them of how we're structured. We have quarterly business meetings. I say, listen, if this hasn't been fixed to your liking within this quarter, you can bring it up for discussion at our quarterly business meeting. But this is kind of how we're structured. I will pass this along. This is the person to talk to. That's a helpful thing, not just for deflecting off of you, but for reminding people it's not only you. We're all a team in this together. The thing that we as pastors are very good at is vision casting, right? For the most part, some of us maybe struggle with that. But it's something that I really enjoy participating as a pastor, of casting the vision, the purpose, the meaning of the things we're doing at the church. I think the spaces in the church are no different. And so when there is a great need, whether it be an AC unit, whether it be a leak in the roof, whether it be, carpet or whatever, one of the most influential ways you're going to communicate to the church is telling the story of that need. If we don't do this, this doesn't happen the same. And if as a church, we don't want this to happen the same, hey, we're all on the same team. We'll adapt and move. But if this is the story we want to tell as a church, we got to do these things. So like for us, we had our carpet in our children's area needed to be replaced, and a lot of other things had to happen too. Now, children's ministry is a really easy thing to tug at people's heartstrings. You want things changed in children's ministry. That's an easy one. But at the same time, we had to tell the story well. This is the vision for these spaces. This is what our children's director wants to do in these spaces. And if this is what you want for our children's ministry, then join in with us, whether it be fundraising, whether it be helping paint rooms, whether it be, whatever it might be. So do what you're gifted at as a pastor and communicate that, and let other people communicate what they're gifted at. All the technical side of things, let them do that. You don't have to be the expert.
Yeah. And you don't have to be the expert. I think one of the things that pastors, our people are inherently, the sky is falling people when it comes to church buildings and church finances and those things. And don't get me wrong, there are times to go in front of your congregation and lay out the seriousness of the issue. But in that, don't just say, okay, we're going to have to spend $300,000, and the only way we're going to do this is if we take out a loan.
Yeah, it's not the way to do it.
Because there's a lot of people that are dead set. Church is never going to go into debt, so we'll just let it sit if we don't. So we don't have to go into debt. Sometimes it's unavoidable to have to take out a loan, but when you present it to the church of this is the issue, this is the seriousness of the issue, that we need to address it soon. So let's talk about some different options to make this happen. A loan might ultimately have to be the solution, but let's talk about some different ways to do that. You're bringing the people of the church in to be able to give their input into it and to help become part of the problem. Even though it's a serious problem, you're not painting this picture of it's the end of the world. You're painting of this is a challenge for us to overcome. And for me, I always try and point it back to this is a challenge for us to overcome as a family. We are a church family. It's time for us to pull together, be unified, and step out in faith and see these problems solved. It's all how you cast it to the church. And when I got here, and I'm still facing this, there's a real fear of finances here. And well, we can't do that. We can't replace ceiling tiles because it's a couple $100. That's not a problem for us. It might be for another church, but that's not a problem for us. But it's just fear mindset. And so you have to just continue to encourage. Yes, these are challenges, but if God wants us to do what he wants us to do here, those things are going to be taken care of. We just have to be good stewards of it. So.
Yeah, you bring up a great point there. I mean, just communicating what the church building is for. It's not an idol for us to bask in, right? It has a purpose for ministry. And so we have to remind people that being a good steward of this space is an important thing, but is not the thing. Mm-hmm. And so when we all are as a church family on that same page, looking at the church as a tool for ministry in our community, then we're a lot more likely to approach things in a thoughtful manner and a fiscally responsible manner too.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's good advice on a difficult situation. And if you're not careful, you can let the deferred maintenance situation dominate the life of your ministry. And so just be careful not to do that, even though it is a challenge. But we appreciate you guys everybody listening to us today. And we'd love for you to subscribe to us on the socials and comment any questions or thoughts or creative ways to fix things around your church that others might be dealing with. We'd love to hear that. And until next time, we can't wait to see you. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.